It was a dark, quiet morning on January 19th, 2002, in the peaceful town of Santomera, Spain. Inside a modest home, two young boys slept soundly in their beds next to their mother, Francisca González. The house was still, and everything seemed calm, until the horrifying events of that night shattered the tranquility forever. By sunrise, police were called to the scene, and the neighborhood was in shock. No one could believe what had happened in that home, and what was supposed to be a normal family morning turned into a devastating tragedy. What truly transpired that night? And how did a mother, once a nurturer, become the center of such heartbreak? Francisca González was born in 1966 in the small town of Stora, located in Murcia, Spain. Growing up in a deeply religious Catholic community, her early years were steeped in tradition and conservative values. However, behind the pious exterior, not everything was as serene as it seemed. Her father struggled with alcoholism, casting a shadow over Francisca's childhood. Despite this, she excelled in her appearance, often focusing on maintaining a polished image. This obsession with her looks intensified after her brother made a comment about her weight, which deeply affected her self-esteem. In her teenage years, Francisca had several romantic relationships, including one with a wealthy foreigner. But it wasn't material wealth that drew her in, it was the emotional connection. At 18, she met 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞𝐿, known as Pepe, and their romance quickly blossomed. After nearly 2 years of dating, Francisca found herself pregnant, and the couple married in a civil ceremony in 1987. A troubled marriage. Their first child, José Carlos, was born shortly after their wedding, but their relationship was far from ideal. Francisca later revealed that Pepe had a history of seeking out sex workers for group encounters, lifestyle choices he attempted to leave behind during their courtship, only for them to resurface after their marriage. As the years went on, their relationship became increasingly turbulent. Pepe introduced Francisca to a world of partner swapping and clubbing, which further strained their connection. In 1996, nearly a decade after their civil marriage, the couple decided to marry again in the Catholic Church, marking the occasion with a grand celebration. By this time, their second son, Francisco Miguel, was born, followed by a third child, Adrian, in 1998. As their family grew, so did the dysfunction in their home. Pepe's job as an international truck driver meant he was often away, leaving Francisca to handle everything on her own. His absences fueled deep jealousy in her, and she became obsessive, even resorting to tracking his movements by disguising herself and taking taxis to spy on him. The emotional turmoil took its toll on their marriage, and their arguments became frequent. The tension often escalated into physical altercations. Francisca later revealed that she had endured psychological abuse during these years, feeling neglected and abandoned. The descent into madness. In an attempt to regain her husband's affection, Francisca turned to compulsive shopping, focusing on buying clothes and lingerie. But despite her best efforts, her emotional state deteriorated. She became dependent on alcohol and drugs, and their presence in the home became a constant. Her struggles with anxiety, insomnia, and anemia were documented in medical records between 1990 and 1999. During this time, her children bore the brunt of her emotional instability, and she became increasingly violent and harsh, abandoning the nurturing role they needed. By 2002, her oldest son, José Carlos, now 14, had taken on the responsibility of caring for his younger siblings. He became their primary caretaker, overseeing their meals and hygiene. But the home environment had become so unstable that no one could have predicted the horror that would unfold on that fateful night. The tragedy unfolds. On the evening of January 18th, 2002, Francisca was bedridden with flu symptoms, but still managed to take her children to the park. That night, as José Carlos kept vigil over the house, his younger brothers slept in the marital bed with their mother. It was in the early hours of January 19th that the tranquility of the night was shattered by the screams of the younger children. Jose Carlos awoke, but assumed it was yet another episode of his mother's violent outbursts. He stayed in his room, not realizing the horror that was unfolding. By morning, the police arrived to find the two boys lying lifeless in their mother's bed, bearing visible signs of violence. Bruises and pressure marks indicated they had been asphyxiated. The investigation. At first, Francisca González claimed that a group of Ecuadorian men had broken into the house through a balcony window. She alleged they had tried to rob her, and she had used pepper spray in an attempt to defend her children before being knocked unconscious. Her narrative seemed to match that of a robbery gone wrong, but investigators soon grew suspicious of her account. The inconsistencies in her story became impossible to ignore. She initially claimed 2 men had broken in, but later changed her story to say it was just one. She mentioned scratches on her face, but later insisted her assailants wore gloves. Additionally, her behavior in the aftermath was far from typical for a grieving mother. She appeared agitated but not distraught, and her focus on specific details raised suspicions that she was trying to steer the investigation. The truth comes out. Forensic analysis revealed damning evidence. The time of death for the 2 boys was placed between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., hours before the supposed burglary had even taken place. Tissue found beneath the children's fingernails matched Francisca's DNA. Furthermore, her medical exam revealed no signs of the physical symptoms typically associated with exposure to a paralyzing agent, contradicting her claims. During the investigation, a series of strange discoveries emerged. Jewelry that Francisca had claimed had been stolen was found hidden in couch cushions, along with a blonde wig and 9,000 euros in cash. These items suggested premeditation rather than a crime of passion. Moreover, Jose Carlos shared a troubling detail. The night before the killings, his mother had asked him to buy batteries for his Walkman, a seemingly innocent request that was later interpreted as an attempt to block out any sounds of the crime she was about to commit. The confession. Under intense questioning, Francisca's story unraveled. She confessed to killing her 2 younger sons, but claimed that she had been under the influence of a potent mix of alcohol, cocaine, and tranquilizers. According to her, she had awoken that morning dazed, only to discover her children lifeless beside her. The drugs had clouded her judgment, she claimed, and she believed that an intruder was responsible for the deaths. Despite her confession, Francisca's narrative continued to shift. She initially maintained that she had been in a hallucinatory state, but as the investigation pressed on, it became clear that she had been fully aware of her actions. The timeline of events showed that she had deliberately attacked her children, using a mobile phone charger to strangle them. The trial. At her trial, Francisca's defense team argued that her substance abuse had impaired her ability to understand the gravity of her actions. However, forensic psychiatrists testified that she had been fully aware of her actions and the consequences. In the end, the court found her guilty of double murder. She was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Aftermath. Francisca's time in prison was marked by a cold, calculating demeanor. She remained physically well-groomed and disciplined, earning the respect of other inmates. She later divorced Pepe and entered relationships with several men during her incarceration. Despite the tragedy she caused, Francisca's story continued to raise questions about her true motivations. In 2016, she was granted temporary release, and in 2020, she was granted semi-freedom, though her status was revoked in 2022 after she violated the terms of her release. Meanwhile, Jose Carlos, now a man with his own family, continued to live in the same house where the murders occurred, a painful reminder of the tragedy that had forever altered his life. Conclusion. The story of Francisca González is one of the most chilling and disturbing family crimes in Spanish history. It raises questions about the nature of revenge, desperation, and delusion. Despite her shifting narratives, one thing remains clear. The brutal murder of her children was a premeditated act. Whether it was an attempt to seek revenge on her husband, or a crime born of her own emotional breakdown, we may never know the full truth behind Francisca's motives.